when we were looking at our budget compared to other years when we had virtual summits versus our first time back in a number of years in person, the impact you personally get as well as our attendees get, it just feels so much more impressionable.
You have to be clear on people's skill sets. What are they really, really gifted at? And that's what you try to leverage or hire for. Make sure that that's matching up.
Okay, welcome to the Digible Dudes Podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
Saving that piece of gum for later.
Yeah. I mostly remember that we're on camera all the time, but not always.
Yeah.
Maybe that was one of those moments.
Yeah, well,
Spitting out the gum right
I think
before.
it's more about people get more conscious about the audio, meaning like if they hear you chewing.
Yeah. The comedian you referred to me,
Tom Segura.
No, the clean comedian.
Oh, Nate Bargatze.
Nate Bargatze, yeah. Yeah, nice referral.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because in both the startup or stand-ups that I watched, it was a slow build, but then by the middle of the routine, I was cracking up. So was Miranda, and one of them just made me think of this because he was talking about how loud he chews, like that his wife is like, I can hear you a mile away.
Yeah.
So regardless of what he's eating, like he knows that's something he can't ever bring to bed.
Yeah.
Just the small stuff that's funny, obviously most of it's pointed towards his family, but yeah, I don't remember the specifics, but I just could not stop laughing.
I'm glad you liked him. Yeah. He's fun because he's so clean, and I think it's sometimes harder to be clean.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
We actually did a skit like when was this? This would have been, I think, 5th grade, but we did my sister and I, with some other folks, did a talent show skit that was about a piece of gum that was like each person was taking out and putting somewhere, and someone else would go and grab it and chew it. And then, but by the end of the skit, like this is like, shows like my, I guess, logical brain. Because when we were doing the skit, we had been given it. I think my dad gave us the skit and said, "Hey, this skit usually does pretty well. You guys could do this for the talent show." And so at the time, though, I was like, "Well, what are we going to use as our piece of gum? Like, what are we going to be, transferring around?"
What's the prop?
And he's like, "Yeah, you don't need a prop. It's fine." And I was like, aren't people gonna know? And I was like, even when you look back at my artwork from back then when I would draw, I was so detail oriented. But anyways, so we did the skit anyways, and afterwards, I was just flooded with people that were like, I can't believe you guys were like trading that piece of gum around, and like they were just blown away by it. I was like, we didn't even have a prop. We just like, faked it. And so that really like dawned on me, like people, I don't know, they just see what they want to see, or they just like will believe it. You don't actually have to have it. So.
Yeah. One of my favorite phrases from radio: theater of the mind. Yep.
That's good. Well, today we figured we'd talk about what we learned in 2023. So a lot of this will be related to business things that we tried, or I have a lot of things that I learned as far as like the negative slant, but I definitely, while you're talking, I should definitely put some of my positive learnings on here.
Yeah, it's not easy when you say lessons learned to think, in terms of, what worked and that we might want to do more of that. But I tried to incorporate a little of that myself because when I looked at my first 5, I was like, this is going to sound negative.
Really pessimistic. Well, why don't you start out first? What's something you learned in 2023?
Well, this one's more pointed at the industry. So a lot of what I think our lists or what's we compiled was more specific to maybe company building, but it's just the confusion around how to handle the headwinds right now. So we got at some of that with was it Jay?
Yes.
Is that his name? Yeah, from CoStar. But it feels like to me, in a lot of the conversations we're sitting in on, and even from OpTech, that the playbooks are all over the place. And this morning's roundup, even when I said, hey, you should tap David and talk to him a little bit about how he was framing things during the pandemic related to concessions, rent reductions, versus up in your advertising, that would be super super helpful. But it seemed like we're the only ones really evangelizing that equation, if you will, that formula. And it's not rocket science. I mean, it might take a minute to sort through in your head, but right now, I don't think that, back to playbooks, the industry seems to have any default formula to how they're handling this. And I think a lot of that probably has to do with the lack of practice because, everybody knows it's been a bit of a bull market, just everybody's looked like a genius for the last 10, 15 years. And so some of the people, if not a lot, that are having to make these decisions weren't even around in 2008, as far as marketing. Maybe the owners have been, but a lot has changed for them as well as far as how they work through this, meaning yield management, etc. So that's not, I guess, some sort of, valuable conclusion that I can bring forward. Only my own opinions about how I might approach it, but it's definitely a lesson that I've learned, and certainly it's been really pronounced here in the last few months, I think, because, it's been budgeting season, right?
Mhm. I was surprised just building on that. One of the things I had written down was that tough times were coming, but was more about the belt tightening. Like I'd always said in prior years when we've had, it mostly happens in interviews where a new hire will say, "Well, what concerns do you have?" And I'm like, "Well, you're really heavy in one industry." Like I think Urania had asked me about this back in his hiring, and so what concerns do you have as far as like a pandemic or something that's going to prevent knock you guys, in a off tilt or into tilt on tilt. Anyways, and my answer was always like, well, as you said, it's been really easy for this industry to lease apartments. In fact, they probably haven't needed to spend as much as they have. So when times get tough, they're going to actually increase budget. But what's happened first, and I guess I didn't think about that in the short time, is I've witnessed more people like cutting budget and getting way more like, well, is this little widget helping us or not helping us? We can't say for sure, so cut it. And I still believe, though, that long term, apartments will have to raise their budget. But we haven't been through a full cycle of that where things have started to get tough. And in fact, I feel like I've only been hearing it the last like 3 or 4 months. So I think, the tough times are actually coming, coming to bear.
Yeah, and there's two ways to go about that belt tightening. One is what you mentioned, what I'll position as zero-based budgeting, where it's like we're going to look at every line item, and if there isn't a clear ROI, then we're not going to keep it. And then there's the broader strokes of saying we're going to cut our whole ILS budget, or we're going to cut down our digital budget by 30%.
Hmm.
Figure it out. And I think I wouldn't do either one, frankly. But what I don't hear is that we're going to, and I know it's harder, especially for third party management versus the owned and operated, but to test out some of these theories versus like make those decisions up front before you move into a new year and just say, this is how we're going to do this. Um, and I think that's part of what plagues this industry is they're not super effective at proving out theories, and I'm not
Hmm.
saying it's easy, so it's not to be judgmental, because that was another lesson I was going to say that I've learned is just how uh, challenging it still is to identify what success looks like.
Yeah.
So when we talk to all these different tech providers that are coming into the industry, and we ask that question, you know, it's not blank stares. I mean, they have some sort of answer, but you you'll hear, well, you can't really do NOI, or NPS is too, surface level, whatever, etc. And you end up saying, well, then what is it?
Hmm.
And I think the industry needs to get a lot better at normalizing the picture, and then being more nimble, which I know may sound idealistic for a lot of people, but in how they can test some theories before they make big decisions. And that came up during the summit, even with Cena when he did his great keynote and talked about centralization. And I was like, okay, argue against it,
Hmm.
which he did an okay job with, but why is it one or the other? Is there a way for these companies with all that they're trying to figure out to be better about testing? Some pretty big assumptions.
You actually hit three of my other ones,
All
but
right,
also,
I was going for four, but I'll take three.
yeah, I'll go with zero-based budgeting. Like, in the past, I had a pretty negative connotation of that term, mostly through via your
Yeah, I
experience.
was going to say.
Yeah, and so I feel like you had really branded it as something, terrible before, and maybe there's a degree of which zero-based budgeting is like feels way more, I guess, aggressive. But as we've been going through our budgeting process for next year, I obviously started advocating for zero-based budgeting. But it was,
But more in the vein, if I can interject very
yeah,
quickly, in what do you need?
Yeah.
in order to be successful. The
Yep.
way it was presented to me was the president of a multi-billion-dollar company asking, "Why are we spending on coffee cups?"
Yep.
That's that's why you got a negative connotation from me. But
Totally.
yeah, sorry, go
Totally.
ahead.
And that's the degree. I have been more of like, what do you need to support X business, to your point?
Mhm,
And most of that has been additive. Like, if we're giving you this goal, tell us what you actually need to get it done. And then even if we can't give it to you, then we'll understand you're raising your hand saying that's a near impossibility.
mhm, mhm.
And so you may have to accept that. That said, there are certain quality of life things that I wouldn't be trying to pull back, like the coffee
Coffee
we
cups.
provide. Yeah, we don't buy cups here, but we do buy coffee. Um,
Taylor would be very upset if we did.
I know.
Yeah,
Yeah, she shout out to her to Taylor. She on our client services team, but she also makes sure that we don't use anything disposable any
yeah,
longer. So
yeah. Very anti-plastic. Don't have anything plastic in your hand around her, or you will hear a mouthful
yeah,
in a good way.
yeah. Although different than Brian. You remember back in the day,
Mhm.
our videographer, he with straws. He was so against straws. Um, and I understand, but I'm also like, I like drinking from a straw, man.
Yeah, yeah. You just got to do the recyclable, or what do you call it? What's the
Yeah, the
material?
reusable one. They're like stainless steel.
Yeah, you could do the stainless steel. There's yeah, like recyclable straws,
Yeah,
whatever. It was just I don't know if it was all because of the turtle with the straw coming out of its
right.
nose that went viral a few years ago. But yeah, he was
I feel like this turtle with the straw in its nose is the modern version of like the fish or the duck with like the
the
uh,
oil on
the
the.
can of rings.
Oh, okay.
Like how they what do they call that? Like the plastic rings that like a six pack used to come in, and then they show it like stuck around animals' necks.
I don't know what the term is, but I know what you're
I
talking
feel
about.
like those don't really exist anymore. These like plastic
Yeah, yeah, they really don't.
things.
They use like convenient, like cardboard
Hmm.
structures now.
Yeah. So someone made progress
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
All right. So then, so zero-based budgeting. The other one that you hit on was the in-person summit, or another one you hit on. I felt like when we were looking at our budget compared to other years when we had virtual summits versus our first time back in a number of years in person, the impact you personally get as well as our attendees get, it just feels so much more impressionable. There's no. I was really pleased to see when we were there. There weren't people multitasking during the summit
Mhm.
or on their computer, but when you're at these other events, like meaning when we did virtual events, you could totally see people were multitasking and not really tuned in. So there is something to don't try to multitask, just be locked in, which bringing people in person does force them to be locked in versus multitasking.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I did see a certain individual, initials BR, and I won't say any more than that, that I caught doing a little bit of multitasking. But for the most part, and I think that's a testament, not to, hashtag humility, right? About our content, but I think that's a big piece of it. And also when you have a smaller room, because a lot of the that we go to, and uh, it's the nature of it, I guess, that you're not going to have breakouts of 15 to 30 or 40.
Hmm.
You're often talking to hundreds of people, and so it makes it far less interactive, which we said we deliberately did not want to, go that route.
Hmm.
And therefore, we're kind of validating that, or at least this year we did, because I agree, most people were totally locked in.
The other one I'll hit on, then I'll pass it back to you, is you were saying, what does success look like? And I had that written down for role clarity. Here at our company, we've been really successful by all accounts. However, there are times internally that people are not aligned or not. Well, yeah, I mean, it's not that they're super unaligned, but it feels more ambiguous about what success looks like. And we took that on at the very beginning of the year thinking, hey, this will just take a little bit to knock out a couple 1 hour meetings. And yet here we are in November and we're still, getting it straight. And I do grant that this is an iterative process. We're further along than we were before, but it's not as tight as we'd want it to be. So, anyways, determining success metrics, even as critical as I am of our clients, often not knowing what success looks like, it as we put an extreme focus on it this year has proven to me like, shoot, man, this is way harder than you think it should be.
Yeah. And God knows you and I have had a lot of these conversations offline. I think my lesson within that is there's more work than I know I'll acknowledge myself. I like to put into the whole success and accountability equation, because our last exchange, I think last week, that I loved your comment on, like, the somebody blew out their Achilles or something.
Mm,
Um, And just for context for people listening, it was like, when do you have to reset or adjust expectations, in the middle of the year with somebody? If you're really trying to improve your accountability in an organization or a department, and something like that happens, using the sports analogy, what does that look like? Is it a full reset, somewhat of a reset? And if you're not careful, you could be constantly making up injuries,
Mhm.
for lack of a better way of putting it. And then you don't have really any accountability. And so that takes more effort, it takes anticipation, maybe some over communication, and it's worth it. Otherwise, you will be left in kind of no man's land when it comes to, are we succeeding? Are we failing? And this individual person, have they done their part the way that we were expecting them to do? So definitely valuable, kind of similar but different perspectives that we share on that.
Yeah, so what we have so far started to practice, which has been helpful, is doing that on a quarterly cadence. So to say, what is success for the company this next quarter, and has that changed from last quarter? So if you were then a marketer trying to take that to your property, it'd be like, hey, in your QBR, Mr. Owner, we're still focused on number of leads. Is that true? Yes. No. Oh, no, it's not true. We're going to move over to quality lead or whatever, like tours. Great. I'm going to let all my vendors know and update that, because there have been experiences where we've had with our clients where they all of a sudden it feels like they change the how we're scoring the game, and it's news to us. It's like, let us know what winning looks like.
Yeah, definitely. Gosh, it was on the same vein as far as what success looks like. Oh, the value of documenting and I'm going to say postmortem. So this is just part of the documentation, but one of the fun takeaways from Adam Grant's book that maybe we read that 2 years ago, but I'll still bring it up now since obviously carried a lot of those lessons forward, but has been thinking like a scientist, putting a theory out there and then either validating or dispelling,
Mm,
the theory. And I think we've put a lot of theories, and a lot of companies do this, but they're not as effective at the postmortems or the follow-ups to see whether that theory actually, was true or false. And where it's been really hard for us, and I imagine even as a digital agency and tech company, like that there's parallels with multifamily owners and operators, is we're all shooting for efficiency. I mean, that is such a big focus for um, owners and operators across the globe, right, across business, and that is one of the harder things to prove out, if you don't have it structured appropriately up front, you haven't documented it. One of the things I often say is that give people, if they find efficiencies, then they're going to find other ways to waste time, and that's not to be cynical or negative, but
mhm.
there's a reality to that. And so really being able to demonstrate the wins that you get from those efficiencies, because for us, a lot of the planning, when we go through it, people are like, yeah, this is going to contribute to the efficiency goal. It's like, well, to what degree? So put yourself out there. Is it going to increase by 5 accounts, whatever? And then when do we come back to you? In 90 days, in 6 months, in a year, and really scrutinize that theory. So, hopefully, having learned that lesson, especially with the management team here, we're way better to be, operating or thinking more as scientists. And I'd like to see a lot more validation in all the efforts in 2024.
And Alex, our new head of product, is, I think, really helping push us there, where he's constantly
Mhm,
like, we're like, even in this morning's meeting, it's like, hey, we should improve this accuracy rate. And he's like, but why?
mhm,
And then, like, great, if we make this investment, it's our assumption that it will actually improve accuracy rate, which then our assumption is that it will improve business, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, credit to him on that. That does hit one of my other ones I had on here too, which is gaining individual agreement. So in a meeting, what would often happen is somebody would say something, nobody would object in the meeting, but you kind of, it's like an auction where it's like, give a 3 count. Okay, nobody said anything. So it is, right? And then later we would often get to a scenario where someone would be like, "Well, I didn't agree to it." It's like, "Well, you also did not object to it." And so that can, there are times when someone doesn't fully maybe buy in the moment, but they don't have the psychological safety, or maybe just don't have their thoughts organized yet to push back on something. And so we will move forward as if we thought that, the executive team move forward, when in reality, and we got this from Margaret, our EOS, or I got this from Margaret, our EOS facilitator, where she says, now just go around the room, and it's not quite voting, but it's like, Reed, do you agree with this? Yes. Okay. Lurch? Yes. Okay, Nicole. And it feels so just the feel. I'm a very logical person, so I often will discount feelings, but when you do that, it feels so much more legitimate when you've
Mhm.
now gotten individual yeses from people along the way. So that at least has been a good learning for me. If you're having something in a meeting, make sure you go around the room, look each person in the eye, ask if they agree and if they have the resources they need to attain that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have AI still very unproven. Um, I think I borrowed this a couple times from your conversation with Aaron Moss. Just as he's been one of the more progressive operators now, I think over life properties when it's come to new technology, experimenting, having the courage, we'll say, and the nimbleness, to be testing a lot of that. But from what I remember, and I'm happy for you to jump in here and back me up, but hasn't been super thrilled or with the results, or at least felt they're inconclusive. And so, rather than all this efficiency and benefit that AI is supposed to deliver to his portfolio in 2023, it actually left him with more questions and more expense. And so, I think that does prove the point here that there's still the jury's still out. It doesn't mean on AI at large. It just means the AI application transferability, if you will, of some of the things that are being built are still a ways out from being conclusive, for multifamily. And so I think the lesson beyond that is to be really careful, thoughtful, back to like what does success look like, how to be smarter about the testing up front is just going to be vital, because the amount of application and technology that touts air quotes here AI is not going to slow down. It's just going to be more and more and more. So that wave is getting bigger and bigger. And, given that some people we have a lot of respect for didn't feel like it was a big win for them in 2023, I think that it's going to create that much more caution. And I hope not in a way that it's a total, step back where it's like, well, we kind of got burned or it didn't work. And now we're not going to be as likely to embrace things. I think it's just about how you think about it, how you test it, not like you either are all in or you're out.
Hmm. Not to get too far sidetracked, but have you used any of the new AI or are you using it in your daily life?
I'm gonna assume yes. But as far as the AI that I'd be using versus, what our clients would be using, or their clients for that matter, right? Probably different AI. I'm having fun, but I'm not using it in any way regularly like the
Hmm.
generative AI.
Yeah.
I think, for me, that was gonna be one that I'd be really interested in.
Well, that's
Um,
my point. It's like I feel like you had been into NLG, 5 years ago with Digible. And so if anybody was going to pick it up quickly, I feel like it would have been you applying it in your life. And I would say for myself, I haven't been using it. And one, I don't remember. So it's like I'm ingrained in my ways of going about my life. But when I do remember what it is I'm researching something like HSAs.
mhm,
Like when we started offering HSAs this next year, and I did a quick Google search, couldn't find the answer I wanted within 40 seconds or something, and I was like, oh, let me ask
mhm,
ChatGPT what
mhm,
it says, and
mhm,
let me ask Bard, and then I found it useful to basically do a lot of the research for me quickly, but it was not my first stop. It
mhm,
was like I got shut down on my first stop, so then I used it as my second stop.
mhm.
Cool. Well, I would say the other one for me, and we've talked about this a number of times, but there's a couple things underneath hiring. So Digital had to do quite a bit of hiring this year. I don't remember. Do you remember exactly how many we've hired this year?
I want to say, well, there's difference between hired and posted, right? We've probably hired somewhere around 30 in that neighborhood, but I feel like we've posted for 50 or 60.
Yeah. So
I don't know if this is going to help you make your point.
Well, just it was a significant focus and had to be for Digital this year. For me, like the Who book was a great idea in practice, and then but I hadn't gotten to really test it last year. So finally, getting to see it go through practice this year, particularly with a couple of executive hires that we just one that's official, and then one that we're hoping for here shortly. It how effective it is. But yet it's a muscle you have to practice, just like a sales script or something. So I want to keep that up. Secondly, would be I was semi-resistant to hiring a recruiter last year because I didn't want to take the responsibility away from the manager. Back to what you need. If a manager needs to hire 3 people, I want them to feel onus, and I don't want them to point blame at a recruiter. But thank goodness we hired the recruiter, because Kelly's been tremendous in helping us fill these positions. And yet it doesn't feel as if it's luckily we've avoided the finger pointing when people haven't gotten their folks, and they do. I have felt them taking some responsibility, like, you know what, I need to do more networking, I need to do some outreach. So it has definitely been helpful. So that's my second one. My third one there, sort of tied to recruiting, is recruiting for tech is certainly different than recruiting for services. And it's very hard for the volume that we're doing to expect someone to be able to do both services and technical recruiting. Also, because it's a much different skill to vet somebody technically. So I'm glad that we're moving forward on something there for next year. And then the fourth one is kind of beyond recruiting, but thank goodness for HR. Like Courtney, we didn't have HR for the longest time. I kept thinking it was like we should just be able to outsource this and have like an HR number we call, but why do we need an official person? But after Courtney got here, she was just so um, quick to come up with a list of, here's 60 items that you really need to do. And, never would it have made my list of like top priorities for the quarter. But yet seeing that there's like 60, it's like, when are we ever going to get to these if we don't have someone dedicated to them? And yet they definitely feel legitimate things that we need to cover off on. And so very, very grateful to have her here now. And she's been tremendous at helping train the leadership team, management team, on a number of different fronts.
Totally. Um, so another lesson learned for me is that there is real conflict isn't the right word, but misalignment between marketers and operators as far as their goals or their incentives. And this was something that I did kind of a survey or poll of 3 or 4, at the summit, but just asked a few of them, how connected are your marketing goals, and think in terms of an annual review. It's like, so if marketer X crushes it, what does that look like versus, the same conversation with a regional operator? And it's just, it doesn't line up. You might think like net operating income, isn't this ultimately what we're trying to achieve for our clients? So therefore, shouldn't we have the same goals? But they're not. And doesn't that present some pretty big challenges as you're trying to put together marketing plans and strategy? If, on one side of the spectrum, you have net income or occupancy, and then on the other, it's like, I'm just responsible for tour to lease or lead to lease or number of leads, etc. And you could say, yeah, there is connectivity there. But if you really boil it down and you said, what's your strategy if you were focused on net operating income versus if you were focused on, number of leads or conversions, for example? It's just two different things.
Mm-hmm.
So, not a huge surprise, but it was validating for me. One other one that I don't know if I can connect the two, but I'll try and let you respond to both of these. But that we are seeing more and more sophistication, I'll say, understanding, higher expectations too. And I think part of that's because of how competitive the market is right now. But as it relates to digital acumen, so we work with these marketers, and what I guess passed passed the stiff test a few years ago, as far as a reporting call, no longer does.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's great. I think it's pushing us to be better. I think it is important that it's not kind of one directional, and that we really are having more sophisticated, more strategic conversations around digital media. And so that's exciting to see. And I think when we had the lunch with RKW, Joya mentioned that she's had the most success, even if they don't always stick, hiring outside of the industry, people that really have digital marketing experience,
Mm-hmm.
versus trying to coach up, some of the multifamily folks that are looking to pivot into marketing, for example. It's not to say
Mm-hmm.
none of them have been able to do it, but I think we are seeing that trend happen more and more, which challenges us then, in those monthly calls.
Totally. Yeah, and I wonder why that is, but it has felt like it's hit the last 6 months, and is it just anecdotal because we have a number of clients that have hit that way or not? But it feels like it's happening more and more. Even I have something on here about partnerships, but even through our partnerships, I feel like we're getting more sophisticated questions than in the past. So it definitely feels as if people from other industries finally see multifamily as a path. And I don't know why that is, like what's causing that influx of folks, or if it's more this industry starting to look outward versus inward.
Well, and I think speaking of productive paranoia, which I added to our list for pre-planning for 2024, but should we also take this as a sign that there's going to be more insourcing in 2024 potentially? Because one of the smartest things you could do is, if you have any plans of doing that, you hire somebody that, as you like to say, been there, done that, and then you have them engaging with, a Digible to get a better understanding of how we operate, what we're doing, how we're thinking, and then you take those learnings and say, okay, now we can quarterback this, or I can quarterback this, and make those bigger goals happen.
Yeah. I like the idea of getting someone on to talk about that because I've got my ideas. I mean, I think it's always cyclical, like we see in many industries. It's kind of like the locator to no locator to locator, but I think that'd be a fun conversation is to talk to somebody that's brought it in house. Put that on my to-do list. One of the things that I feel like was one of the biggest learnings for me mid-year here is it's you it's not super wise to focus on both scaling a company at the same time that you're working on margin expansion. So we had put up for this year that we wanted to effectively double Digible's revenue this year, but we also then wanted to work and lean into profitability. So we became profitable last year for the first full year of profitability, and we're like, great, now we have these economies of scale. So those are cool, but we also want to double the business, and we want to lean even more because if we can just improve things 1% now, that 1% matters even more than it would have before. And we made valiant efforts at this, but definitely it fell short of a little bit on both ends. It's because we were trying to do both things at the same time. I think if we would have leaned into one or the other, it's kind of like having as I don't know which book this was that we were reading, but there's one book that was like the word priorities was not a thing before because it was priority. You could not have more. It means
Yep.
the most important thing. You can't have multiple most important
That
things.
was from the book Essentialism,
There you
and
go.
they said that priorities was not plural until early 20th century, I
Yeah.
think, like in the late 1800s even. It was still just priority.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
I want to remove that from my vocabulary and just
Yeah.
stick with the one.
Yeah, it's tough. In fact, I had that one, but something about essentialism versus kind of the intangible value, or you know, the um, the total's greater than the sum of the parts, kind of concept. Meaning, we read that book, and you also read, which I hadn't got to yet. God, the time management guy,
Dan Martell.
Dan Martell, and just how critical it is with the little time that we have, and especially as you continue to have larger responsibility, to be ruthless about your time. But then we've also shared examples multiple times throughout the year of just where we allowed ourselves, I guess, that conversation that, if we were being really ruthless, we wouldn't have,
Mhm.
and it really landed, or collectively. And a lot of that you can be said or pointed at like relationship building, but I think there's other aspects of that. So I didn't come away with a hard conclusion more than maybe my lesson was, pure essentialism will not work for me,
Mhm.
but neither I am going to be carrying more of that into my mindset in 2024, instead of just kind of letting, I'll say, my heart, or my mind, my interests kind of guide me,
Mhm.
too much.
Totally.
Got to be a little more thoughtful than that.
Well, as a takeaway for the margin expansion plus scale, the a good example for a marketer would be don't try to both dramatically increase your leads at the same time you're reducing the cost per lead. Like that's how I would take it forward. Meaning you can't
Yeah,
don't focus on
exactly.
two things at once. Pick the priority and lean into that.
Yeah, love it.
Well, what else you got?
Well, I have, and I think I can translate this to a bigger lesson, but for us, account management versus sellers, like paid professional sellers. We have introduced a lot of new services and products in 2023. I don't have a handle on how many SKUs, as you like to call it, but there's no doubt we've brought more to the table. And I think it's been a challenge, and we knew it would be going in, just what we already have, and then adding more to the mix on how that how they would handle it as well as how our clients would handle it. But what we've seen from a lot of other companies, and we were trying to somewhat replicate that recipe, was that if they brought a new product to market, they would immediately get a good amount of success just because of the established clientele, relationships, etc. And it didn't work out as much that way for us. And I think I mean, I don't want to start already getting into those Achilles heels, like all the injuries, that have prevented that from happening. My bigger lesson and it's got a little to do with the Who book, but you have to be clear on people's skill sets. What are they really, really gifted at? And that's what you try to leverage or hire for. Make sure that's matching up. Because if one of our goals is you mentioned revenue versus, margin or EBITDA, and we're really trying to push revenue, how much expectation can we put on, professionals that haven't been trained for that, don't have you know, a knack for it, if you will. So either or, just instinctually they're good at it or they've been trained at it. And so then therefore don't we have to manage our expectations or potentially find a different solution?
Mhm.
So there's just a lot of this going on in the world and the industry where, and some of its efficiencies, but you're close enough. You're adjacent to what
Yeah.
I really need. So shouldn't you be able to do this? Can't you do it? And yeah, I've learned that lesson. I think you have too. So,
Yeah.
we're looking at different ways to move the needle in 2024.
Yeah, I think Alex has been pushing me on that as well, where it's what problem are we trying to solve and make sure that it's the best solution for that problem, not that it's the sum of the parts. Being like, well, it also does that and it does that and it does that. So cool. Because then you're getting a solution that's like just kind of subpar at everything,
Mhm.
and really you got there because you were wanting one thing. So, yeah, that's a great lesson. Well, the last one I'll share today is um, man, I don't even know how to call this a lesson, but so maybe it's just acknowledging. But we've done so much great work putting into place EOS and Jim Collins tools, and it's I think we've done a good job of setting, I guess those frameworks up. But following those frameworks and having the discipline to follow them has been really challenging. And maybe there's I don't want to like pretend it's almost like you with the 4-day work week saying, hey, this isn't a test. We're just going to say we are doing this. So maybe if I was to redo it, I'd say, hey, we are going to do this 20-mile march and let's put it into effect now. But let's revisit it a year from now, for example, just to say, hey, did we set it correctly, or is there a reason we may want to change this? And not that I want to like have that out every year, because I do think at some point you want this 20-mile march or whatever it is to be in place permanently. But if it's the first time you're setting a goal, it's similar to setting a sales goal where you're like, hey, we're going to do 100,000 in revenue, but you picked it kind of out of the air with some guided thought, but you should have a chance to, finesse it a little bit, or at least regain agreement. Um, so yeah, as we do the frameworks, I think to pretend like you have the Michelangelo's David or something the first time that you do it, would be a little bit arrogant. So you should build in expecting to have to come back to it, and definitely use as a heavy guide.
Yeah, I think that's a great one as well. Um, it's the buffer, and that is in essentialism or the Dan Martell that you told me about, but being, you know, I think that's in one of those books, but being realistic about, and I think it was related to meetings or something. I don't know how I'm going to tie this back to what you just said, but I'm trying to point out the buffer that you need to give yourself with certain disciplines or frameworks.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I think you could end up being too hard on yourself, maybe making some decisions that you shouldn't, just because you're trying to check a box and say we follow this religiously.
Hmm.
And it's so true in the early stages, certainly of a company, but even of a team, an organization, you don't really have a true baseline, and so be careful, yeah, about those goals and how maniacally, I guess, you pursue them. The last one that I had that I'm going to leave us with, unless you wanted to squeeze one more in, but is more general, also coming from the summit, but is just the lesson of we still are doing a lot of the things the way we've always done them in the industry. And that was the intent of that workshop about rethinking and unlearning, but we broke it up into, the various categories, mostly related to multifamily marketing. And it was stunning to me how difficult it was for some folks. And yes, they didn't walk in like prepped for it, but to really unthink or
Mhm.
relearn aspects of their business. And it just really screamed like institutionalization.
Mhm.
Thank you. And I don't want to say how dangerous that can be, but it is a part of what's slowing us down. Is we're not asking ourselves those questions enough to really, accelerate the industry forward.
Totally. It's another one I want to get back to. There's a few things I wanted to talk to you on that, so maybe we'll record that here shortly.
Cool.
Well, we got to get out of here. We're getting kicked out of our room again.
Yeah, getting the stink
Um,
eyes out there.
yeah, we have. It's funny. Like we double the office size, and no matter where we go, we keep getting kicked out.
I know. I felt
We
like
got
we
to take
made it
over the
pretty
next
clear.
building.
Like this podcast room is for podcasts, not for meetings.
All right.
All
Well,
right.
good episode. A lot of great learnings this year.
Yeah.
All right, all. See you next time.